Well, good morning. It's Friday and welcome back to the shop. So, as you can see, the car is in primer, but it was a bit of a challenge getting here. So, number one, on Wednesday night, I decided to spray the car with the epoxy primer. And the reason I wanted to do that is because epoxy needs about 4 to 24 hours to cure. And I wanted to spray Thursday, so I wouldn't have been able to spray the epoxy in the morning and then the high build in the afternoon. So, Wednesday night, set my gun up, mixed up the epoxy, and sprayed it on the car. And as you can see, it went on wonderfully. There was no issues with it. I had a great band about 8 inches wide, 8 inches tall, about 3 inches or about 2 inches wide. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, those are the sprays. So sprayed out beautifully, went on the panels, no problem at all. And that's me using my DeVilbiss with a 1.7 millimeter tip. Went on great. Wednesday night, I was happy. I cleaned everything up, shut the place down, left the fans running, and I let it sit there all night. Next morning, I got up, came in, checked the paint. The paint, of course, was hard. It's one layer of epoxy with the fans running. It cured overnight, no problem. So, ready to put on the 2K urethane, which is the high build primer. So, I had a half a gallon left over from the other, when I sprayed my Mustang a year and a half ago. I guess what has happened is that paint had reduced or evaporated or concentrated, whatever you want to call it. I didn't know that. I mixed it up, made sure all the solids were up into the paint. I took that, put it into the measuring, added the catalyst to it, stirred it up, put it in my gun, and I came back to my board and I, did some test sprays on it. I was doing a nice fan. Everything looked great on the gun. I started spraying some of the vertical panels I have here. I've got the door and the hood and the trunks, sitting up here. I started to spray them. After about a minute or two, the fan started collapsing. And it started going from a nice, 8 or 10 inch band to a 5 to a 4. And it got to the point where I was spraying like a 3 inch wide band. What's the first thing you do? Well, the first thing you do is you back up your top adjustment on the screw because you're trying to open that fan back up again. It increases the pressure, tries to open the fan. The fan would not open. I then increased the pressure. I went to about 35, 36 pounds, which even though it's a primer is still a bit much. Trying to increase that Venturi effect to try to pull paint out of the gun so it can then spray that paint. Wouldn't do it. So I got about 3/4 of the way just through my doors and my hanging hood, and the gun literally started to collapse. So I thought, oh my gosh, I got a problem with the gun. I didn't clean it properly, blah, blah, blah. You know what it goes. So I go into the shop, grab my backup gun. I simply take the contents, pour it into the next gun, snap the airline on it, come back out here, do a test spray, and for goodness sakes, it's spraying wide. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I guess I screwed my gun up. I didn't get more than 2, 3, 4 minutes, and it started to collapse again. So what had happened? It would appear that the paint I had a year and a half ago, as I mentioned, must have concentrated. Now, I do have reducer. Sure, I could have poured some reducer in it, mixed it up, and used more of it. But now you're reducing your filler primer, your high build. Now, if you want a high build primer, you don't reduce it. If you want just a primer color or primer paint, then yeah, you can reduce it. I don't want to. So basically, I gave up. I took both guns, dropped them in acetone, disassembled them, dropped them in acetone, and I let them sit there for a good hour. And in that time, I had to go out to Napa, and I picked up another can, 1 gallon of the 2K urethane high build. And $230 later, just for the can of paint, never mind the activator and never mind the other things I needed to buy for the car, $300 and something later, we had a brand new can of paint. So what it is, I took that brand new can of paint, took the guns out of the acetone, cleaned them, ran the rods through all of the Venturis, made sure everything was good, mixed up a new batch, put it in the DeVilbiss with the 1.7 tip, and as you can see in the bottom left, had beautiful fan, good concentration, and I was able to spray these panels within a half an hour. I sprayed the first line, gave it 15-20 minutes to flash off, came back in, sprayed the second time, and now what we have is we have 2 coats of primer, high build, sitting on top of 1 coat of epoxy. So that should have sealed this car really well. Now, the nice thing about once you spray a solitary color on a car, you instantly see every little pinhole, every little defect in the body. I couldn't see this before because when you looked at the car was just a camouflage. I mean, we had black and red and blue and green and all sorts of colors. I remember the body fillers and all of that. So when you looked at the car, there was nothing that you could focus on. And again, here's just, again, an air bubble in the fiberglass. So now I can see it, easy to fix. So I can fix all of these air bubble defects, and then we're gonna flatten this car. What does that mean? We're gonna take a block, put some 220, let's say, on that just to get started, and we are gonna start to sand it. Now I have guide coat. Guide coat is simply a black flat paint that you dust over the car, and then once you dust that over and you sand, you're trying to get rid of all the black paint, but without bearing or cutting yourself so far that you're getting down to the epoxy. Now the epoxy is hard, which is fantastic, because as I'm sanding, I'll know when I hit the epoxy, and I know I can't go any further. Now that's the problem with a fiberglass car. If this was a metal car, like my Mustang was, and I had a low spot, right? So that's what the guide coat's gonna do. You're gonna spray, you're gonna sand, and what's gonna happen if there's a low spot when you're sanding, you're gonna leave a black circle there because you can't get into it with the sandpaper, so you know you have a low spot. If that was the Mustang, I would have simply hammered and dollied that metal up so that it came flush, so that when I sanded, it would then flatten right out and get rid of all the black paint. Can't do that with fiberglass. You can't hammer and dolly fiberglass. So any low spot on this car, either I have to sand down to it, but I might not have enough thickness to do that, which means I gotta build body up to bring it up. That's why there's a lot more body work on a fiberglass car than there is a metal car. You can dolly metal, you can't dolly fiberglass. So we're in a position now where this car is now 2 coats of high build, and really all we have to do now is start sanding this car, and that'll be the next step. You're gonna see me in here now with just a block and sand, and we're gonna take this entire car down in 1 coat, maybe even 2. Now, I hate to say 2 coats. We might actually hit that epoxy to flatten it. Once we flattened it, we're gonna then hit it again. We're gonna put it in another high build. But the reason for that high build is now to come back with the 4s and the 500s, because it's already flat. And now all we gotta do is knock that down so that we have a nice 500 or even 600 sandpaper base. And that is what we're gonna spray our color on. Couple of weeks maybe to flatten this car out. So we're July, so might be in August spray time. We'll have to see. But anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.